Today I'm going to have a presentation that really has two parts to it. The first part is going to be really unveiling what I think are some uncomfortable truths around this space and some misconceptions that have crept in over the last, since the inception really of Bitcoin as blockchain. And then in the final part of the presentation, I'm going to talk to you about Centbee, which is the company I'm currently involved with, and what we are doing to make payments, cross-border payments, payments for digital services and goods possible very much here in the African continent, but across the world. This summit has been sponsored by what is called the BSV Blockchain Association. And what is BSV? Well, the B stands for Bitcoin, because remember, this is where it all began. When Satoshi Nakamoto created this technology that we now call blockchain, it is Bitcoin. That is the name of the technology. But of course, because we have so many different versions and types of blockchains out there, it has become quite a confusing space, especially in the Bitcoin world. Because as you, I'm sure, know, there are multiple versions of Bitcoin. And that's a very important thing to know. Because the early days when Bitcoin was first brought into our lives, there was a lot of misconceptions, a lot of false narratives that crept into the blockchain space. And that's largely because it coincided with the global financial crisis. So, of course, a lot of people who were upset about that financial crisis and believed that it was due to central banking, fiat currencies, thought that Bitcoin could perhaps be something that can solve that problem of what we call a fiat currency system. And they thought that this could now be a solution to that problem where we have currencies that can go through inflation, can be debased. What happened was this whole universe now of different cryptocurrencies. Now, I want to make you aware that Bitcoin, as originally designed, is not a cryptocurrency, and I'm going to talk more about what does that mean. And also that Bitcoin SV stands for Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, the original idea of what Bitcoin should be. Now, of course, we've got other versions of Bitcoin out there, BTC, BCH, and so on. But the original idea of Bitcoin, as designed by its inventor, was not to create this anarchist technology that can be unstoppable and all that, but actually to fit within the existing regulations around transactions. This is really what crypto has become. This idea of an anonymous, decentralized, encrypted technology, something that governments can't stop. And this has got nothing to do with what Bitcoin was intending to do. The false narratives that have crept in now, I'm sure you've heard of some of these, this idea of a digital gold. Now, this is what has made this whole industry really sort of pumped up on this idea that you can invest early, as we heard earlier about being an early adopter, that you can now buy these crypto coins, and just by the virtue of the fact that they have a limited supply, that they will go up in value. And this, of course, really, when you think about it, when you are not drunk really on this idea of getting wealthy with no effort, the idea of something being digital and just by the virtue of the fact that it is a limited supply doesn't in fact make something valuable. The only way you can have something that is valuable, of course, if it has a limit in its supply, if it's scarce, but it has to be useful. And the way Bitcoin was designed was not just to be this token that is 21 million and that's all there is, and you can now transfer it around the world. But it had to have some kind of use, some kind of utility, so it could behave like a commodity. A commodity is a thing of value, something that you can use or consume that actually adds value to your life. Air is something that is quite useful to us, but it's not very scarce, and so we don't put a lot of value into it. But there are some things that are very scarce and also add value to our lives, and that is where the value of that thing rises. But then another misconception that crept in was banking the unbanked. And of course, banks don't just deal with payments. Banks offer all sorts of other services like loans and capital allocation and that sort of thing. So unfortunately, this idea of Bitcoin or crypto being something that unbanks the banked never, if you understand banking, really made sense. And it's something that we shouldn't really be looking at. Yes, of course, one day we could perhaps use Bitcoin in banking and we could provide loans in Bitcoin, but it itself as a technology platform, as a protocol, which can never, of course, be a banking system. And then finally, the worst part of all this, and this is really what has made it so difficult for legitimate businesses like Centbee and many of the companies that I'm sure you will all try and create over the months and years to follow, so difficult for regulators, because really the worst things about the false analogy or the false narratives is that when you have crypto, it's unconfiscatable or it's uncensorable. Unconfiscatable means that your funds can't be seized. And also, if you want to make a payment to anyone in the world, nobody can stop you. Now, these are all absolutely false, as was designed by the original Bitcoin. But now, this is the narrative that has been spread by very prominent people around the world for the last decade. And this is what regulators are listening to. And so, of course, they're going to make decisions about whether crypto is banned or whatever it is. Because if these are the sorts of narratives that we're all professing and we're all thinking is important about this space, then, of course, no regulator is going to feel comfortable with this. Because there are so many problems that come when you're making transactions in terms of terrorist financing or money laundering and that sort of thing. And these narratives spread by very prominent crypto people are sowing the seeds of their own destruction. They have no idea how the world works. They think that this is something that they can just steamroll into the world, and whether regulators and government and law enforcement like it, too bad. This is how it is. And so these are very unfortunate false narratives that have crept in around the original idea of what Bitcoin should be, which is now represented as BSV. So I wanted to just make sure that you understand this. This is another terrible idea. I'm sure you've heard of DeFi, or decentralized finance. And the whole idea here, really, and I like to term this unaccountable finance, because what its pundits think is that we can create these financial organizations or financial instruments that operate completely outside of governance or anything like that. And they use this terminology, smart contracts, which really is an overused term that doesn't really mean anything apart from the fact that you have software operating on data. And of course, the whole unregulated nature of these DeFi projects will make it a non-starter from the beginning. So if you are thinking about getting into any of these ideas that I've just been speaking about, you're going to hit a brick wall. And worse, you're going to totally put off all the regulators that you're going to have to deal with. And I've been working with regulators around the world for many, many years. And I can tell you now that it's just a matter of time before every single idea, every single concept, every single business that you are pursuing or think that is going to be successful around DeFi and all this stuff is a non-starter, and it's going to end badly. You're going to waste your time and you're going to waste your money. I hope that you take that to heart, because, as I said, it will be a lot of time wasted if you are pursuing those projects. But really, when it comes to BSV Blockchain, which is the original idea of what Bitcoin should be, the real value in this technology really started out as a low-cost payment system. Remember, the title of the original white paper was Peer-to-Peer Digital Cash. And when you think about cash, the idea of cash transactions is that it shouldn't be expensive to make a payment. And when you look at these cryptos like Bitcoin BTC or something, of course the transaction fees are so high that you could never ever think about using it as a transactional medium. Really, that's where the whole idea of, okay, you're just going to hodl, you're going to buy these tokens and you're just going to sit on them. The really fundamental, amazing opportunity that the BSV blockchain gave us was the idea of low-cost digital payments. And this is incredibly transformative. If you just think about moving money around, if you're making payments, if you want to send money to a relative in another country or in the same country, it's really difficult and expensive. And BSV blockchain, the whole idea around Bitcoin was that as a cash system, it should be extremely low cost. And I'm talking about less than even perhaps 1 naira to make a transaction. And you can just imagine the opportunities that this can create for people, not only it being a low-cost payment system, but also a global low-cost payment system. So if you are working here in Nigeria and you're serving, maybe you're consulting to an international company, you can now easily get paid, of course, with a very low cost, but then also being able to send it maybe to the next town if you've got relatives there or in the next country. Something that I cannot express enough is that when Bitcoin, the original idea of Bitcoin, the BSV blockchain, was developed, it was built with regulation in mind. In other words, all the rules around payments, around transactions, those were considered by the inventor and actually built into the technology as well. And so when it comes to compliance and regulatory compliance, only the BSV blockchain has the ability to comply with all local rules and regulations around payments and transactions in terms of transparency and all that. And I'll talk more about that as well. And then finally, the thing that I think most people are excited about, even though my favorite thing is payments, is the data management platform. The ability to have digital assets or be able to verify data, do all the things that everybody is always talking about, all these wonderful ideas that are being explored today by people just like yourselves. Being able to use this as a distributed ledger, some type of data management system that I believe will create a new alternative way of looking at the internet itself, in fact transform the internet, much of the way the internet works today in terms of hosting information and all that sort of thing. So BSV blockchain, as originally devised by its inventor, had all the ingredients of a technology platform that was regulatory compliant, was low cost, was accessible, and of course has some wonderful features that are still yet to be discovered. When it comes to the BSV blockchain, the reason why I say it's not a cryptocurrency is because it's obviously not encrypted. All transactions can be viewed on the blockchain. You can see the amounts, you can see the addresses where the transactions are going, and you can see the provenance of those transactions. You can trace it back in time. Now, of course, this is extremely important when it comes to payments from a regulatory point of view, because one of the most important things about payments is being able to trace those payments. This is something that is not spoken about enough. The crypto community hates this idea, and that's why we have alternative versions of Bitcoin like BTC, where they are actively trying to change Bitcoin because of this fundamental concept around it, being able to trace payments. The crypto communities around the world don't want traceability. It doesn't serve their purpose. But unfortunately, those are the most prominent voices that we hear today. And I just really hope that regulators can look past all that and really dig deep into how Bitcoin was devised. The idea of mining. Remember, there's this concept of what's called proof of work inside Bitcoin itself. And a lot of people think that proof of work, the idea that we have these mining operations consuming huge amounts of electricity to secure the network, people often think that all that energy is going in to secure the network, so it becomes impossible for there to be what we call double spends or some kind of fraud and that sort of thing. But you know, something that people don't really understand about mining is not that it takes all that energy to secure the network through technology, but mining, the reason why there's proof of work, is to force miners to become large enough so that they become visible to law enforcement and regulators. And the security is not about the technology and the energy that is consumed. The security of Bitcoin comes from the fact that all these mining operations are exposed to law enforcement and have the ability to be served a court order. If they so much as create a fraudulent transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, it's not that the security of the technology is going to stop that. It's the fact that they don't want to put all that investment in all their mining operations at risk. Because if a miner creates a double spend transaction, which is what the whole point was, to stop fraudulent transactions, if a miner processes a transaction like that, that will be totally visible on the blockchain, and then law enforcement is going to be able to serve that mining operation and take away all their assets, their millions of dollars worth of assets, and that's over for them. So, and something that is hardly spoken of is that the whole point of this proof of work process was to stop miners from acting dishonestly. And in fact, if you read the Bitcoin white paper, it talks about honesty. And honesty isn't where you are forced to do good. Honesty is when you do good out of your own self-interest. And so miners, through proof of work, are now exposed to the law, and they have to now decide, do they want to waste all that investment in those mining operations and by committing fraud, or do they want to behave honestly? And of course, this idea of unconfiscatable transactions, completely false, because actually the way Bitcoin was designed is that money can be frozen and assets can be seized because miners need to act lawfully. Again, is a misconception. And then, of course, identity, extremely important. Now, we saw that transactions are transparent, but of course, it's all about addresses and that sort of thing. But one of the most important things is that as a compliant company, every single transaction and every single address on the Bitcoin blockchain can be, in fact, linked to identities. And when I talk more about Centbee, I'm going to talk to you about how we link our users' transactions and we have identities linked. And this was designed in the original Bitcoin white paper where the inventor said identity is firewalled. In other words, they're separate from the blockchain. Yes, you can pseudonymously know addresses and that, but you don't know what they mean. But the accountable institutions that are creating applications and businesses on top of this, they, of course, can know their customers and know their users and be able to deliver that information to a regulator or a law enforcement official if so desired. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about Centbee, because this is something I'm very excited about. And we, in fact, operate here in Nigeria. We're a global company. And Centbee has 2 applications. I'm going to speak mostly about Centbee Wallet. That's the app on the left, and I hope that all of you guys can download Centbee Wallet, because if you do and you use it and you open it up and you check your transactions and you share it with people, you are going to be earning honey, what we call honey, which is basically Bitcoin SV. And it's going to be a great way for you to get used to using Bitcoin. Our other application, which is a cross-border remittance application, also uses the BSV blockchain, and that's for cross-border remittances. In other words, sending money from South Africa, which is where Minute Money operates, to Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and Senegal, and we use the Bitcoin blockchain, BSV blockchain, for that. And that's something that is growing and is great. A very important thing about Bitcoin SV is that our whole vision around Centbee was to make BSV payments possible for everybody. I've been in love with this concept for the last 12 years of a low-cost digital cash system. And I've always had in mind this idea of creating an application, I guess very much in the same way that we have things like M-Pesa across the continent in various countries. And really, Centbee Wallet is exactly that on the BSV blockchain. We want to make it easy for people to be able to use BSV as a cash system, digital cash, which really just comes out of the title of the Bitcoin white paper. And so what we needed to do was to try and create an application that is really simple for the average person. And of course, it's quite easy to develop this onto feature phones and as a USSD application. But what we've done is we've started out a smartphone application. But one of the most important things is to be able to onboard people. And so what we've done is we've created a number of ways where you can easily top up your Bitcoin wallet. Now, a very important thing is that we do not want to try and encourage trading or speculation or anything like that. And so what we've done is we've specifically gone out of our way to make sure that Centbee operates within the same sorts of guidelines. Companies like M-Pesa, at least products like M-Pesa are doing that. So we've created a number of ways of topping up your wallet with credit cards, with bank integrations, or even in-store ways of taking cash over the counter. Very important when it comes to your digital cash is what do you do with your digital cash? Now, of course, in the crypto community, it's all about hodling or investing. That's something that we think ultimately is going to go away as the crypto markets, I think, ultimately crash and burn. This is not financial advice. But a very important thing is that you need to be able to spend your BSV. And of course, when it comes to this whole space, we've struggled with regulators for a long time, even though we've been very much involved with regulators. In fact, Centbee was invited to join the regulatory sandbox in South Africa as part of the Reserve Bank's project to try and see how crypto and can be used. And what we've done is we've tried very hard to enable ways for people to spend their Bitcoin SV, not just in South Africa, but across the world. And so what we did was we bundled a lot of value-added services into Centbee Wallet, where you can go and spend on things like mobile data or airtime or Uber or shopping vouchers and all that sort of thing. But I want to just talk about this because of crypto and because of this false narrative that it's this system that is trying to undermine law enforcement and regulators. We've had quite a hard time convincing retailers and brands to jump on board because none of them want to be associated with crypto. I think that they all understand that crypto is untenable and cannot exist. And so even though we are very much pushing the regulatory friendly concept of Bitcoin as a transparent, traceable system, we've now had a very difficult time to try and get retailers and brands to now embrace this whole thing. And we used to have in Nigeria here in the store, if you download Centbee, hundreds of ways that you could spend your BSV in Nigeria, and just recently we're told that we can't do that, not because of any regulation or anything like that, but because the brands themselves right now feel uncomfortable about this regulatory gray zone that crypto as a general concept operates in. And so I'm very excited and I'm very keen to see that regulators and government officials are starting to actively look at creating a regulatory environment for these things. Because without that, as long as we operate in a regulatory gray zone, it's going to be extremely hard for us to actually build products that people want to use and that other service providers, other businesses, other companies want to be involved with. And when we educate our regulators and we get them past this idea of crypto and we just talk to them about Bitcoin SV, specifically the way it was originally designed, is that once we can create a regulatory environment, whatever those regulations are, as long as we can create some kind of certainty, then I believe that businesses, the sorts of businesses that you yourselves, I'm sure, are conceiving of, will have a much easier way. Now, look, it's obviously not great to want regulation, and I'm pleased to hear that the regulation, Mr. Abdul Ali, is talking about working with businesses. That's really pleasing to hear. But of course, we don't want to be suppressed or inhibited from doing good things, creating valuable products for our customers. But we need to have some kind of regulatory certainty, some kind of way of getting licenses perhaps, so that businesses and service providers and users around the world can feel comfortable that yes, this is a regulated space. Until that happens, as long as we operate in this regulatory gray zone of uncertainty and we're not sure, we're never going to be able to move forward. And so I welcome our regulators to come and start actually creating defined processes and licenses perhaps, so that we can actually build the products that users want, and we can move this whole ship forward, and we can add value to the world, and we can really get a chance to see how this technology can transform our world and create business opportunities and so on. So this is, of course, a product that we've now just included into Centbee Wallet. The ability now, anywhere in the world, if you've got a Centbee wallet, you could now send money through our African corridors, because we have, at the moment, our corridors exist from South Africa to several African countries, including Nigeria, Kenya, Senegal, Ghana, Uganda. And right now in Minute Money, which is where those corridors exist, it's been limited to the South African corridor. But now with Centbee Wallet integrating that same product into the wallet, if you are in the UK and you're sending money home here, you can actually have a Centbee wallet, and at a very low cost, you can actually send money directly into a Nigerian bank account or mobile money product or a cash pickup as well. And so we're just piloting this right now. We have some users who are checking it out, but in the next few weeks, we're going to make that available to everybody. So if you do have relatives in the UK, in America, in South Africa, or whoever, please encourage them to download a Centbee wallet, because at a much lower cost than any other remittance service out there, Western Union or whatever it is, you'll be able to now send money home at a very low cost using the BSV blockchain. So we're very pleased about that product. One of the things that we've always done and this is really the antithesis of this idea of crypto, is that we have gone out of our way to know our customer. And so when you use Centbee, you're going to see that what we do is we do an identity check, and we then are able to know your ID and all those sorts of things, just so we can show to our regulators that we are acting in a responsible manner. We know who our customers are. We know the transactions that they are creating, and we can see and create whatever anti-money laundering or counter-terrorist financing checks that we can do. And this is really what's so important about this space, is that when you have an accountable institution creating these products, it means that regulators can feel comfortable that all that information can be known. Right now, so much money moves informally in suitcases and so on, specifically cross-border. But if regulators can actually allow businesses to create these products, then finally they can have visibility on these transactions and the customers and the users that are using this technology, and they can feel comfortable that the right sorts of, the responsible sorts of actions are being taken in terms of all the things that they worry about, like money laundering and so on. So we do an identity check. Also, of course, when it comes to public keys, that's just a technical concept, which means we have the ability, once we've got, because we create these wallets, to be able to see all transactions done by our users. And then we were able to do responsible things like limiting what users can, how much money they can actually put into their wallet. Right now, if you use M-Pesa or something, you can't put 100 billion nairas into Peso or whatever it is. This is just something that obviously creates uncertainty, especially if you have the ability to send Bitcoin anywhere. And so one of the other things that we can do is we actually limit how much money you can put into Centbee. This, of course, gives comfort to local rules and local regulators that we're acting in a responsible manner. And it means that it cannot be exploited, it can't be abused, you don't have the ability to send. And another thing actually that BSV Blockchain has now incorporated is something called Paymail. Paymail is just like an email address, and so you can send money to somebody like me, Lorien at Centbee.com, without knowing their complicated Bitcoin information, addresses and so on. And this is another way that we can link identity to transactions and comply with regulations, for example, like the Financial Action Task Force around the world, where we have to do things like what's called the travel rule. In other words, we have to know the identity of the recipient and the sender, and so we can do that with Paymail. Next slide. I think I'm coming to the end now. Thank you for bearing with me. And then, of course, as I said to you earlier, the ability to know identity and to be able to link those transactions on the blockchain. And this, of course, gives regulators a lot of comfort because they have access to the blockchain. Everybody does. They have the ability to audit that blockchain. And if they have the ability to audit the blockchain and have an accountable institution like Centbee linking transactions to identities, then this is something that can give a lot of comfort to regulators. As you can see, I've spent a whole lot of time trying to say that when it comes to the BSV blockchain, regulators can feel extremely comfortable that this can be operated in a responsible manner where there's visibility and the system cannot be abused. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.